Engin,
Thank you very much.
please
Thank you
start.
very much, Tomislav. First of all, again, I would like to express my gratitude for making it available for me to be here and to share our thoughts and knowledge about the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. Meanwhile, having been visited Dinara Mountains and your work on the ground, I should say that we are very much inspired by the work that you have been doing in Dinara Mountain Range, especially in terms of using traditional ecological knowledge and scientific knowledge as a complementary knowledge sets in achieving both sociological and also ecological objectives there. So we are very pleased. My name is Engin Yılmaz. I am the Executive Director of Yolda Initiative. And as Yolda, we have multiple hats. One of them is we are also the coordinating member of the Alliance for Mediterranean Nature and Culture. It's a partnership of different NGOs in the Mediterranean, all focusing on the nature and culture nexus with a specific focus on pastoralism, but also other land and sea use systems. We are also a member of the Global Alliance for Rangelands and Pastoralists, serving as a member of the Secretariat, Global Secretariat and Global Coordination Group of the Global Alliance for Rangelands and Pastoralists. I would like to start with the process regarding the proclamation of 2026 as the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. The idea for the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists arose back in 2008 during the International Rangeland Congress and International Grassland Congress in China. And there had been lots of efforts towards achieving this aim, but the main milestone was the formation of the IYRP support group back in 2016, and it was also the year when Yolda was established. We were established at the end of 2015, and we right away became a member, active member of the IYRP support group because we are a nature conservation organization, and it's my motivation, also Yolda's motivation, to protect, conserve, and restore nature. And my interest regarding mobile pastoralism. When I say mobile pastoralism, it comprised of transhumance, nomadic pastoralism, or different forms the world over. It started because of vultures back in 2010, 2011, because the vulture populations in Turkey has been declining very sharply. And when we were doing the field work and the research, we identified that one of the leading reasons drivers of this decline is actually the loss of mobile pastoralism in the country, because they provide healthy food availability for healthy vulture populations. And since then, I have been personally engaged in mobile pastoralism. First of all, for the benefit of nature conservation, but then along the road, we have learned a lot. And we have been also trying to achieve other objectives throughout the process, which I will provide more information later on. So 2016 was a milestone because the IYRP support group was established, and with the IYRP support group, we worked with all the partners around the world. We worked a lot for the proclamation of 2026 as the year. And the support group later on, its name has changed. It became Global Alliance for Rangelands and Pastoralists, and it's a collaborative partnership of over 400 pastoralists and supporting organizations dedicated to raising global awareness of the vital role rangelands and pastoralists play, including in conserving and enhancing biocultural diversity, tackling land degradation, fostering sustainable food systems, advancing climate action, contributing to economies, and also supporting the socio-ecological resilience of millions of people world around. And this alliance was already a success in terms of bringing together the conservationists and the pastoralists, because For many decades, there was this understanding among the majority of the conservationists that pastoralism is not compatible with nature conservation. However, in the last decades, especially with the growing scientific evidence, the benefits of pastoralism for nature conservation, also for other purposes, has been demonstrated, and which led to collaborations between nature conservationists and the pastoralist organizations. So we did do a lot of work in terms of policy, advocacy, communication worldwide, and as a result, in 2026, the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2026 as the United Nations Intentional Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. I will after now refer to the year as the IYRP. That's the abbreviation. And also the same resolution appointed FAO as the leading UN agency to oversee the implementation of the year. So this was the famous picture that we shared on social media when the proclamation happened to celebrate the decision. So why rangelands? First of all, rangelands cover more than half of the Earth's terrestrial surface and support biodiversity, including species and habitats of high conservation importance, ecological connectivity, climate resilience, and sustainable food systems. And these socioecological systems have been shaped and maintained over generations by pastoralists whose knowledge, mobility strategies, and stewardship play a critical role in sustaining ecosystem functions, biodiversity, and livelihoods across vast landscapes. Meanwhile, we use the term rangelands because the initiative was started by the Anglo-Saxons. And when we use the term rangeland, it's covering also the grasslands, savannas, and other type of ecosystems. So it is an umbrella term that is being used. But it's also actually within the year it's not just the focus is not just on rangelands and grasslands, but also other ecosystems like forests that are being utilized and maintained and sustained by pastoralists. And why pastoralists? Because they are not simply beneficiaries of rangeland investments. They are among the principal stewards of healthy rangeland ecosystems and key partners in delivering biodiversity conservation, climate resilience, restoration, and sustainable land management outcomes. Supporting pastoralist knowledge, institutions, and stewardship, and securing their rights are therefore essential for achieving lasting environmental impact. When we say knowledge, we are actually referring to traditional ecological knowledge or local ecological knowledge, which has been evolved for thousands of years, for hundreds of years in different regions, and it's accumulated knowledge that is being transmitted between generations, also between communities. So this transmission of knowledge is one of the most key aspects of the sustainability of the system. And based on this importance of rangelands and pastoralism, the motivation behind the IYRP, the International Year of Rangeland and Pastoralism, was to increase worldwide understanding of importance of rangelands and pastoralists for food systems, biodiversity and climate crisis, economic resilience and culture, and also to break myths and misunderstandings and amplify the voices of pastoralists. The myths, as you may guess, one of the myths is that the pastoralism is, in its essence, is not compatible with nature conservation, and it is an archaic way of land use system, food production system as such. And to fill knowledge gaps with more participatory research, this is one of the key aims of the year, because as it is the case in the world, also in Europe, there is a huge knowledge gap regarding the state, extent, and the impact of pastoralism in regard to different aspects. And as I said before, there have been multiple scientific research studies and publications have been shared along the last decades, but there is still a lot of need to fill the knowledge gaps, especially with an inclusive approach, which means bringing in the pastoralists themselves and also using their traditional ecological knowledge as a complementary knowledge set for scientific purposes. One other aim is to increase sustainable and ethical funding and investment in rangelands and for pastoralists. This is our call our call for action, especially by the state, by the public authorities, but also UN agencies and also other actors that play a key role in financing for conserving biodiversity, for tackling climate action, also for ensuring sustainable development. Accordingly, one other aim of the IYRP is to inform decision making at all levels. When we say all levels, it is from sub-regional, sub-national levels to national policy for us, but also regional, as it's the case with the European Union, or global policy forums like the UNCCD, United Nations Convention on combating land degradation, or Convention on Biological Diversity, or Convention on Migratory Species, or the Climate Change Convention of the United Nations as such. One of the significant aim is to inform all these decision-making mechanisms for enlightened policy to benefit current and future generations, not just pastoralists, but also all the other communities that are benefiting from these socio-ecological systems. And of course, one other aim is to mobilize people worldwide to address today's challenges and grasp new opportunities in rangelands and pastoralism. I would like to very shortly talk about pastoralism as a socio-ecological system, because it's not just a production system. It's a holistic socio-ecological system built on different components, different institutions. This can be, customary governance systems, management systems, but also it is reflected in the belief, in the values, in the artifacts, in the overall life of these communities. And in its core, this system is actually evolved by mimicking the natural moving patterns of the wild animals. So they are mimicking, they mimic the wild herbivores in their migration and adapted it as a production system. And therefore, the system is very much depending on nature, and depending on nature, and the culture of these communities are evolved according to the needs of the their lifestyle, which is evolved with the nature. So it is a way of life shaped by ecosystems, while they also simultaneously shape the ecosystems themselves. And Europe is a very great example in these terms. Majority of the landscapes that we admire right now are heavily impacted by the grazing and browsing practices of the pastoralists throughout millennia. And right now, almost all the landscapes that in Europe are some way influenced by pastoralism. And for the communities, nature is not merely a resource; it's a living environment. This is their home. To say it very basically, it is not. So in some countries, even the word nature doesn't, especially in the Mediterranean, nature doesn't make a sense, because it is where they live. They don't need to name the environment they live as nature, and their cultural integrity is so very much linked to nature. And it's a system built around uncertainty and environmental variability. This is very key in responding to also the modern challenges that we are facing today. What I mean is they are following a different, their life is adapted according to different parameters, like the rainfall, the availability of forage, the threats or socio-ecological issues like the proximity to markets, etc. So the system is always being adapted to the trends, shifting realities, and uncertainty. And when I say adapted, the adaptability it's a core essence of the system. So it is a bit it's a bit misguiding to say that pastoralists are so very adaptive. Actually, the system itself is evolved on adaptation. So it is in its essence has this feature as the adaptability. And therefore, the second line there, mobility provides a high capacity for adaptation, especially when we are talking about Europe, we are talking mostly about vertical transhumance, vertical mobile pastoralism, which is named as transhumance in the region. And they are following the seasonal changes in defining the dates or the strategies regarding the mobility. And accordingly, again, it's a dynamic production model based on continuous adjustments rather than fixed practices. They are every year adapting themselves according to the current context and the current variabilities. And they have very low external inputs with high ecological compatibility. I will also provide more information about this later on. But compared to conventional livestock production systems, especially compared to industrial livestock production systems, they use very low external inputs. And because of the mobility, they reduce the risk of overuse and resource degradation because they are between their wintering and summering sites, they leave for instance, the vegetation rest itself and regenerate accordingly. And they sustain both production and ecosystem health over the long term, which has been the case for millennia in Europe as well. So regarding the case with Europe, that there is a prevalent, well, it's true that the practice has been declining sharply, especially in the last 50, 60 years in many of the countries in Europe, but it's not always the case. And by the way, the situation changes depending on the local context. In some countries, the reasons behind this decrease is different. For instance, in the Balkans, we can talk about the changes of the borders, which restricted the mobility of these communities. But in other countries, that may be the reason may be different for this decrease. But it doesn't have to be the case always. For instance, we conducted a study in Spain, which was led by Maria Fernandez Jimenez and John Reaton. And in this study, we saw that between 2010 and 2020, not only some families restarted transhumance, but also several new young herders opted to use transhumance from their inception. So we had newcomers, and the main reason for this increase, this is, by the way, the Aragon Pyrenees in the northern part of Spain. And when we analyzed the drivers between this increase, despite the decrease in other places, we saw that the conditions were in favor of transhumance in those years, especially regarding access to pastures, both summering and wintering pastures. For instance, the amounts for renting these pastures decreased. And also there were other parameters as well. And consequently, the number of the people, households doing transhumance increased with newcomers, new young generations who doesn't have the tradition of transhumance in their families. And that this was also an interesting example in terms of the knowledge transmission between these new coming young farmers and the other traditional transhumans. So that was also important for the possibility of knowledge transmission, not just within the communities, but also between the communities, including the newcomers. So yes, it is true. In general, in Europe, the practice is decreasing, but there are also examples where at which the opposite is true, also may be true. This is because the practice is so when the conditions are right, it's a very rational system, right? It is rational for the socio-ecological reasons. What I mean is it's economically viable. It is also good for the ecology. It's good for the health, welfare of the animals. It's also good for the welfare of the people. So in its essence, it's a very rational production system. And when the conditions are right, the system actually works. And this is how these communities over centuries, over millennia, survived, because they had the traditional capability to develop responses to uncertainty, challenges, etc. It is only in the last 100 years, especially, the challenges, the threats they are facing are beyond their capability to develop sustainable responses. Therefore, we have the sharp decrease in the practice. But however, as it is in the case, when the conditions are met, the practice can be continued with actually an increase in the number of the households doing this work. Here you see a map. It's a continuing work. It's an interactive map led by the League of Pastoral Peoples with many different partners. And it's a map showing the locations and the profiles of the pastoralist communities world around. It is still evolving with many new entries. And as you can see, in Europe, there are still many communities that are being registered within the map. I would also like to show this map. On the left side, you see the migration routes, as it's called, drover's route in Spain. We did a study with our partners, especially Transhumanca and Naturaleza in Spain, to spatially map the migration transhumance routes in the country. Spain has a significant situation because the transhumance routes, the drovers routes, are under the protection of the public. Back in 1995, there was this royal decree which reconfirmed the protection of these routes for the purpose of usage by the transhumans. In this map, you see these bold lines. By the way, the total amount of the routes that we managed to map was 88,000 kilometers, and it's expected to be actually 125,000 kilometers. So you can see it's a huge, very complex network of routes. And when we did this work, we also tried to identify which routes were actively used back in 2017, and the bold lines are those routes that are that were actively used in those years. And these are the ones the only ones that we identified, but were definitely much more. So you can see the presence of the practice still very viable in Spain. On the right side, it's a bit difficult to see, but we also did the spatial mapping of the migration routes in the Pyrenees of Spain. We haven't been able to finalize it for not Spain, sorry, France. We haven't been able to finalize it, but the legacy of the transhumans is so very viable still, especially in certain locations in Europe, in some countries, while the situation may be different in others. I'm telling this all because the pastoralism, for instance, there are lots of grants by the European Commission allocated to third countries overseas for supporting pastoral systems, while the pastoral systems in Europe are not visible by the wider public, wider communities, and the public authorities. But there is actually a significant amount of pastoralists still practicing their livelihoods in Europe. So, in line with what I said, that it is not visible in Europe, because many people are thinking that this is an archaic system and it's not modern, and it doesn't compete with many objectives for the welfare of human and nature. But it's not true. And I wrote here the real question as I wrote here: should mobile pastoralism adapt to modernity, or should modernity adapt to ecological realities of mobile pastoralism? As the real question, because throughout the human history, we developed many values, many knowledge that are still very true, and that can benefit in our efforts to address the challenges, the local level, national or global challenges that we are trying to address too. But because of romanticizing pastoralism, this potential is not being seen, and it is perceived by many as a very folkloric way of livelihood, and it doesn't really require the attention of biodiversity conservation policies or climate policies or socioeconomic policies. But actually, I wrote retro innovation because, as I said, we don't have to innovate everything. We already, as humans, we already develop lots of knowledge and lots of value that can be still used today, and in responding to challenges that we have. And pastoralism, mobile pastoralism, in its essence, is one of these knowledge systems that can be used, that can be referred as a retro innovation. But because of this romanticizing pastoralism, or the lack of visibility, the lack of representation in the policies, particularly in the Europe context, they do find themselves in a threshold to choose between dignity and tradition. But they actually need to also access services like education, healthcare, digital technologies, veterinary services, modern communication, fair market. So this is not the question is not modernizing pastoralism, or pastoralism should be to keep pastoralism as a traditional way of living. It's a combination of two aspects. So pastoralists can benefit from novel technologies, modern approaches, but also we can benefit from their valuable information, traditional ecological knowledge, and the strategies and the institutions, cultural institutions they have built over millennia, and complement these two knowledge sets as a way to move forward. So again, they should not have to choose between dignity and tradition. And there are many examples of pastoralists using novel technologies such as satellite imagery, weather forecasts, mobile phones, electronic animal identification, online marketing, or also like technologies for responding to human wildlife conflict, etc. They are also using this modern way. They are also adapting themselves in terms of markets as well. Trying to use modern market systems, mechanism and schemes like value-added cheese production or certification schemes or agritourism, which have strengthened pastoral economy. So they are trying to, in many places, they are trying to diversify their income sources. And in doing so, they are benefiting from different different possibilities and different tools and technologies. And as I said before, traditional ecological knowledge, or you can call it local ecological knowledge, it's not offensive word term, actually. Even just the knowledge of, moving between wintering and summering side is a very crucial thing for biodiversity conservation, climate action, etc. But it's an information that has been developed over millennia, and we need to, preserve it. And this knowledge and the technologies and the novel information systems can complement each other. And pastoralism, as I said, is a very opportunistic way of life, and they accordingly adapt themselves to the new conditions. And I was going to say one more thing about this the modernity issue, which I right now don't remember, but I will come back to that later on. So regarding the economic resilience, so this is one of the myths that the practice is not viable in terms of economic resilience, and in many cases the public policies, especially regarding subsidies and incentives, they are focusing on industrial production, livestock production systems. In the same study that we carried on in Spain, our colleagues Maria and John, they compared the profitability between transhumance on foot, transhumance on truck, and semi-extensive production in central Spanish Pyrenees, the Aragon region. And the result was amazing. The highest profitability was by transhumance on foot. So this study provided evidence on the economic rationality of transhumance, but under contemporary environmental and economic conditions which are supporting the system. And regarding economic resilience, there are, of course, different components that are being tried to, engage for increasing this resilience. And certification and product recognition is one way to do it. And there are lots of examples in European countries in doing so, in Spain and France, in many countries, in the Mediterranean and the world over as well. Trying to use these novel mechanisms to increase the profitability of the system. And there is this other important aspect as well, the awareness of the consumers in regard to the sustainability of the products produced by these systems. These are healthy, safe, and nutritional products. And as much as the consumers know these characteristics of the products produced by the sustainable pastoralism, they do tend to purchase such products. But it is, of course, a process to build on this awareness, and it is, of course, also it is also a process in terms of reflecting the difference between the products of sustainable pastoralism and industrial lifestyle production in the prices is also a process. In some countries, the consumers are very much willing to pay that difference in terms of the price. In others, not yet. But as I said, this is a process to be built on, and also the policies, the public policies to support these systems in terms of representation and strengthening the position of such products in the markets is very crucial. That's why I wrote to public support. And as I said before, the public support has different tools, and subsidies and incentives are one way. and one crucial way, especially in the context of Europe. But there are also other tools that can support the economic resilience of these systems. And when we are talking about resilient pastoralism in terms of economy, there are strong common characteristics. It's first of all, the communities are strong. They are well coordinated, well organized, and there are networks between different within the net. There is coordination within the networks within the communities, and also coordination between the networks. So there are the networks that are advocating for the rights of the communities in different aspects, and their grazing rights are secured, and their mobility is facilitated. And there are institutions that are supporting these practices and the way they produce, and they have easy access to markets, and their knowledge is recognized by the wider public, but also by the policies. And inclusive governance and management is another characteristics for the economic resilience. This is even including the conservation policies as well. As much as the conservation policies and their implementation are inclusive, the economic resilience of the communities increase. So we had a system that worked in Europe with multiple benefits for the welfare of all. Biodiversity, the communities, the economy, the climate action, etc. But what happens if we lose transhumance? This is already happening in many places in Europe. Grasslands will gradually degrade and lost. Open habitats will become overgrown. For instance, in northern Italy, there are many pastures that are the grasslands that are being lost because of the abandonment of the practice, abandonment of transhumance. This is also the case in Dinara, where that's why our colleagues at Guillaume and their partners are conducting this work in Dinara mountain range. The loss of the practice had a huge impact on the ecosystems, and many specialized plants disappeared there. And also the birds, insects, pollinators, depending on grazing and on this vegetation decreased and will decline if this continues as it is right now in all over the world and also in Europe. That will be definitely the consequence of the disappearance of transhumans. And we are living in the Mediterranean. There is a huge wildfire risk that we are year by year witnessing it, and the frequency and the intensity of wildfire is increasing. And if we don't have these grazing and browsing animals, the under tree vegetation is not consumed and is not trampled, and they serve as like a fuel for the wildfire. And so which increases the intensity and also the spread of the wildfires. We also should know that particularly the migration routes used by transhumans in Europe are serving as fire breaks, which is very crucial for slowing the dispersal of the wildfire. And ecological connectivity would decline, especially in a region like Europe, where the fragmentation between different ecosystems and habitats is a major threat, one of the most important threats on biodiversity. The ecological connectivity function will decline. And unfortunately, these changes could occur very, very quickly. I'm just going to give some examples of in this regard based on our work. For instance, in Turkey, we conducted a very extensive research to compare the differences between the meat production by the nomadic pastoralists and the meat production by the industrial and conventional livestock production systems. We use the methodology of the global footprint network, and which is what's that called? I can't remember the Earth Shoot Day. So it is about which practice use which practice in what volume use the Earth's biological capacity, and the result was unbelievable. The ecological footprint of the nomadic pastoralists compared to industrial livestock production systems are requiring the 135% less of the Earth's biocapacity compared to industrial systems. So this is, of course, as I said before, the systems are using much more less input. This is one of the reasons. But the other reason for this enormous difference is that these systems are providing lots of functions for ecology, for biodiversity, and at the end, in the calculation, such a figure appeared 135% less of the Earth's biocapacity. And we also said just a couple of minutes ago what happens if transhumance disappears. Also at the beginning of the webinar, I said my first motivation was the vulture. So this is showing some visuals from our collaborative study in Spain with our partners. It is about it was the study was the research was about understanding the links between vultures and transhumans in the country. And there were 60 griffon vultures tracked with satellite trackers. And we also collected data on the migration routes of transhumans and the volume of the animals. I mean, how many, which breeds they are using, and how many of them are they are using, etc. And also, we use, camera traps. So we use the different methodologies to understand the link. As you can see in the left side, these are this is about understanding the relation between the foraging patterns of vultures and the movement of the transhumans in Spain. And in the left side, you can see the foraging points of the vultures are actually concentrating on the wintering sites in the south, Extremadura, in the Extremadura region, and also the northern part of Andalusia, La Jaén, etc. These are the major wintering sites for the transhumans in Spain. And then they have summoning sites in Prenas, in the north, where they spend their summer. So this was an open, the obvious relation between the movement of the vultures and the transhumans, because vultures are, especially in their breeding period, they are following the transhumans in the country to feed themselves and their chicks. And also during the winter, they are going back to, when we are talking about griffon vultures, they can fly tens of kilometers in a day. And their movement, these spots are where they touched the ground to eat food. So we know that it is certain that these dots are about, consuming food. So there is a direct relation between the movement of the animals. And there were also one other methodology which there were carcasses left in the open areas maintained by the transhumans, and in the covered areas by the trees. And there was again the relation was obvious, because the vultures were consuming the carcasses in the open lands, in the grasslands that are maintained by the transhumans. There were three scientific papers came out of these studies. All three are, providing proofs of these beneficial links between the vultures and the transhumans. And in this case, it is also an example of the answer that I said. If we lose transhumans, we are going to lose also healthy vulture populations, at least in Spain, but this is also the case with other countries where there is a decline in the mobile pastoralism, transhumance, or nomadic pastoralism. The vulture populations are declining, and of course there are other measures to respond to these conservation needs, like restaurants, the vulture restaurants, etc. The most sustainable way of preserving these scavenger species, but also other species, like it's the case with Dinara. We need to have transhumans maintaining these landscapes for the benefit of these ecosystem species and habitats. One other point that I said earlier, the ecological connectivity. So this is the study again back in Spain. We try to analyze the relation between the areas of high biodiversity importance and the mobility of transhumans in the country. And as I said before, we couldn't identify all the active transhumans routes. Even only the ones that we identified, there is a percentage of 30% and around 30% for both key biodiversity areas and important bird areas, that these routes are overlapping with these areas. So because this livestock is moving, the ecological connectivity function, both structural and also functional connectivity, is ensured by the communities. In Turkey, we also conducted a study to understand the ecological connectivity function of a nomadic pastoralist community. And because a goat, for instance, a sheep can eat 10 kilograms of, let's say, plants, and during the migration in every 70 kilometers, let's say, they leave those the seeds of those plants with their dunks or through their hair, etc., along the way. And in our study, what we did was we accompanied a nomadic family, and we collected the dung, feces examples, and also the hair examples of the herd during their 350-kilometer spring migration, summer rotation, and again the fall, autumn migration. And we collected all the seeds within those faces or the hair, and we replanted them. And the results are amazing. The scientific paper is going to be published hopefully by the end of this year, but the results are amazing, showing that the mobility of these livestock is playing a very crucial role in terms of dispersing seeds along their routes. So they're providing ecological connectivity between different ecosystems along 350 kilometers. In this case, in Spain, I mean, some of the routes are 500 kilometers, and that's the same functions are already being also achieved by the mobility of these communities and their livestock. So one of the questions considering the decline and the loss and the abandonment of the practice is that, can transhumans be reintroduced? Yes, it can be reintroduced, as it is the case I told about regarding Spain in the Aragon Pyrenees. It was reintroduced, but it is becoming increasingly difficult over time. First of all, the main reason is the migration routes disappear. It's not like Spain everywhere. In Spain, as I said, the routes are protected by the state. Even though it is protected, many of them are degraded or lost because of different land uses, but still the situation is better than majority of the countries. And in other countries, this is not the case. The migration routes are not, first of all, they are not known, they are not acknowledged, and they are not secured, definitely. So losing the migration route is a fundamental obstacle, a barrier to the mobility of the animals. In such cases, the animals are being transported by trucks, etc., which means majority of the ecological functions of the life of this practice is not achieved, because through their movement, it's not just seed dispersal, etc., but it's also contribution to habitat heterogeneity along the way, providing open areas, etc. And this diversity of habitats is supporting ecosystems, and using transports, the trucks for transportation of the animals is a huge threat on the sustainability of the systems as well. And knowledge is lost, one of the other main issues, because as I said before, this system evolved in millennia, and that there is a huge set of traditional ecological knowledge that is supporting the sustainability of the system. This is related to many things. This is related to nature. This is related to social relations, economic relations, etc. If the practice is lost, then the knowledge cannot be transmitted to the new generations, and it's a huge obstacle for reintroduction. But there are also solutions that are being introduced in different countries, like in Spain, in Italy. There are shepherd schools being established. When I say shepherd schools, it is actually a very inclusive way of transmission of knowledge, because the experienced shepherds are being part of these processes and transmitting their traditional ecological knowledge to new coming generations, which is crucial. So it is not just an ethnological issue, to develop inventories of this knowledge, but this knowledge is in action. It should be transmitted before it is lost, and it is practically adaptable to the local context. And young people live. This is also a major issue, but it is, again, as it's the case in Spain, also in France, we have many young people, doesn't have to be coming from a transhumance family tradition, are becoming a part of this life and starting their own herds, or becoming shepherds of, hired shepherds of others' herds. And infrastructure changes. This is, again, particularly about the migration routes, but also for the summer pastures and the wintering the wintering areas. And this is very much linked to the next one, the urbanization, because these areas are converted to other land uses. So rebuilding this social system is much harder than maintaining it continuously. And conservation is usually much cheaper than restoration. And but it's very important even if you want to keep the transhumans to continue, or to engage new pastoralists, new coming generations to adapt this way of life, what is the motivation? So since 2015, we have been doing fieldwork in many countries, especially in the Mediterranean. When I say Mediterranean, it's including the North African countries as well, such as Morocco. And we always try to ask the question of what's motivating them to carry on these pastorals. Of course, the challenges, threats, many are are considering to abandoning this lifestyle, etc. But on the other hand, many refers to freedom of this lifestyle as a main aspect, main motivation for them to continue. And identity and family traditions is one of the most important thing as well, because as I said before, this is not just a production system, it's a socio-ecological system built on different components, and the cultural integrity, cultural identity of the communities, and defining how they are, who they are, is a very important part of this. motivation, and they also very often refer to identity and family traditions. And the other things are like connection to animals and connection to landscapes have been also many times referred by the pastoralists in terms of what motivates them. And when I say to animals and landscapes, this is not just like an informative relation, but this is also an emotional relation and a reciprocal relation that they see themselves as a part of nature, and they are connected to animals and landscapes. In short, the pastoralism actually is a lifestyle which is depending on connections, the connections between different elements of environment, not just connection between people, but both biotic and abiotic elements of the environment is very crucial for their motivation, and this is very much linked to their cultural integrity and identity as well. And in relation to freedom, independence. So many of them so very much like the idea of not being constrained by those factors that we, the people in the cities, are facing. They love their independence, which is linked to also environment. So for them, it's not merely an occupation. It is a way of understanding the world, way of interacting with the world, way of way of life, comprised of many different sociocultural aspects. Can other management replace pastoralism? This is also another question being asked, especially within the nature conservation fora. Only partially, as we see in the case of Dinara as well, like mechanical mowing, controlled burning, vegetation removal, these are very important. This can replace certain ecological functions and should be used as complementing techniques to pastoralism, but they cannot replicate the complexity created by the mobility of the lifestyle, because as I said before, they disperse seeds, they also selectively graze, and they recycle nutrients, they create habitat mosaics. So these are not easy things to be achieved by other techniques. And so in these terms, their ecological role is extremely difficult to reproduce artificially. And as we are talking particularly about the European context, so we have the European Union, the regional decision-making authority body. We have been, with our partners worldwide, we have been advocating for many changes at the policy level. And many of them are also the case for Europe. And one of them is the differentiation of pastoralism with other livestock production systems. And this is not happening. This is also one of the leading reasons why of the knowledge gap that we have. There are no the statistical studies are not really responding to these differences between pastoralism, other livestock production systems, and accordingly, the other policies are also not, reflecting these differences between pastoralism. Actually, the pastoralism even is not that much differentiated from the agriculture sector as a whole, let alone the other livestock production systems, and this is a barrier. This is a very crucial barrier in our understanding the extent, scale, the threats on pastoralism in Europe, but also in terms of having the knowledge to inform us, to inform sustainable policies for benefiting not just the pastoralism but also the rural communities and the communities at large. So this is one of the most important things, policy goals that should be sought in Europe to differentiate pastoralism at the European Union level, but also at the national levels, so the policies can be adapted accordingly. And integrating pastoral mobility into mainstream policies, this should be followed the first step. When I say this, one of the challenges that pastoralism is facing is that policies are not adapted to the mobility of these communities. This is linked to education. For instance, in many countries, the migration season is overlapping with the statutory education period. So the families are being splitted. So the children are not capable of joining the migration, and which is actually the most important period for new coming generations to learn about pastoralism, about transhumance, because along the migration route, it is the most important period for the children to learn about the vegetation, to learn about the trads, to learn about the herd management, to learn about relations with other communities, etc. So the migration itself is a school, the traditional school of pastorals, but the policies are not adapted to this mobility. And this is also the case with health, with access to other basic services. So they are not reflected in the policies. And this is also the case regarding the incentives and subsidies and other forms of supportive legislation. This mobility is not acknowledged and recognized and integrated in the mainstream policies. And the other thing, that, as you know, there is this green infrastructure category within the European Union policies, and the migration routes and the summering and wintering pastures, grasslands of these communities should be actually acknowledged and recognized as green infrastructure, which is defined within the European Union legislation because of the because of the benefits they provide to biodiversity, but also to other other aspects for the welfare of the communities, welfare of the biodiversity, and also in climate action, and also welfare of the communities in general. So these are the main policy targets that we aim for within the EU for the moment, and we are very much hoping the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists are going to contribute to the momentum towards achieving these policy goals in the European context. This is my last slide, but this is going to be actually about the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. So, as I said before, there is this Global Alliance for Rangelands and Pastoralists. It is again, it's already a success for two reasons. First of all, of course, for ensuring the proclamation of the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. But before that, it was already a success because it achieved the long-sought collaboration between pastoralists and the other actors, starting with biodiversity conservation organizations, and who are increasingly recognizing the importance of this practice for the welfare of biodiversity. So the Global Alliance has a regional structure. So, for instance, for Europe, we have the European Regional IYRP Support Group, and there are also such groups in other regions, in like for Central Asia, for Southern Africa, for Eastern Africa. And the organizations, pastoralist organizations and other organizations are joining together in these networks and trying to, work together in achieving on the joint objectives of theirs, depending on their priorities. And accordingly, there are also these working groups at the global level of the Global Alliance for Rangelands, for instance, on biodiversity, for instance, on gender, for instance, on economics, for instance, on climate change, etc. And these working groups are also serving as, exploring exploring the good lessons, best practices worldwide, and facilitating the knowledge exchange between communities for replicating those that can be replicated in their countries as a solution to the challenges they are facing in all the ends, all the aspects of the challenges that they are facing. So I would like to kindly invite you all, those who are present here, to reach out to us so that we can provide you information on how to engage with the Global Alliance and so with the IYRP this year. And of course, this is not just about this year, the 2026, but all the work is being actually done for beyond 2026. So all these networks are going to be maintained and invest on the momentum created this year. And this year is about, so far until this year, we have been since 2016 particularly, we have been trying to increase the visibility of the importance, but also the challenges that the communities are facing, and accordingly we aimed for policy changes at the global level particularly. So there are significant steps achieved within the global policy frameworks, like within UNCCD. There was this specific decision in 2016, and there will be again another decision that we are trying to influence right now in Mongolia this year during the Conference of the Parties of the UNCCD 17 in August. And also the Convention on Biological Diversity Conference of the Parties will take place in Armenia, and CMS already happened, and we achieved endorsement of a specific resolution on pastoralism and CMS listed migratory species. So this year is about moving ahead from knowledge to action. We are actually trying to mobilize all the relevant actors, particularly state members, the members of the European Union included, to take action towards achieving the objectives of the year, and this will continue beyond this year. Therefore, I kind of would like to invite you all again to get in touch with us so that we can inform you, we can provide you information how you can engage with the right groups or right paths to amplify your objectives in line with the IYRP. I once again would like to thank very much to our colleagues at SPIOM and their partners, and also would like to very much thank to them for all the work that they have been doing in the Dinara Mountain Range. Again, it's very inspiring, and we have been also promoting it as a good practice, as a good lesson to be replicated in other countries, not just in Europe, but also in other countries, for the protection, for the conservation of biodiversity, also for the sustainability of the transhumance and pastoralism in general. Thank you very much for listening me. If there are any questions, I would love to respond to them.
Thank you very much once again, Engin, for your nice and comprehensive presentation. I hope that a lot of things are now shown from maybe some other perspective that people might not be thinking about before. And yes, as you said, I would like to open the floor for questions. Currently, we are having 2 questions in Q&A session, which I'll read to you, or you can see them on your own. And then if someone else wants to have some make some questions, please do raise your hand and or write the question in Q&A session, and we'll be happy to answer them. Okay, first question came from Miss Sarah. It's about the situation in southern Portugal. Do you know of any current examples of transhumance in Portugal, particularly in southern Portugal in Alentejo region?
I'm trying to unmute myself. I think I did. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Well, first of all, there is the Montado system, which is very famous in Portugal, like the sustainable landscape management by the pastoralists in Portugal. That's very important. This is similar to Tehasa ecosystem in Spain, which is managed mostly by the pastoralists themselves. So to my knowledge, I'm not sure if there are active transhumans in Portugal, but I would love to. I will be pleased to get you in touch with our contacts in Portugal to find out if there are any active transhuman communities there. Just perhaps you have seen already my email address. Just write to us so that I can get you in touch with our contacts. Because the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists is not just about mobile pastoralism; it's also including the sedentary pastoralism, which is present in Portugal. So we do have members in Portugal who can guide you much more in this regard for the case of Portugal.
Okay, thanks. And maybe just to continue to that question is again from Sarah. It's maybe I missed it, but I have a question. When we talk about transhumance in modern times, what can you tell about accommodation for shepherds during migration?
Depends on the location, depends on the country, but in many countries, this is one of the standard questions that we are asking to the pastoralists that we meet on the ground is that if they have any vehicle like trucks or other vehicles that they use during the migration, and so in some places they use caravans or such things to sleep over during the migration, but in many cases they prefer actually to sleep on the ground watching the sky, even if they do have a vehicle. And if you're talking about the Mediterranean in general, not just Europe, then we have also the cases of nomadic pastoralists, many which are still using tents, the traditional tents. It is so they don't have a fixed household. They are using their tents in the wintering period or summering period along the accommodation zone as well. And in many terms, they also refer them as very modern accommodation facilities because they do have the capability of, flexibility and also for the heat isolation, etc. But yeah, in Europe in general, the many transhumans are using their vehicles along with them, and they also use these vehicles to sleep over. But again, depends on the length of the transhumans. Some of them maybe, as I said before, 500 kilometers. Some are just less than even 40 kilometers. So it depends.
Thank you, Engin. One more question from Mr. Kutniak regarding this ecological footprint requirements that you spoke about on one slide. Could you give a little more about that?
Of course, the ecological footprint, it's a methodology developed by the Global Footprint Network, and the idea is to calculate the resources, the ecological resources required for any production system. And in this methodology, the data that you are collecting is all the inputs and outputs that any production system is comprised of. Like, for instance, for the pastoralists, we ask many questions, including the oil they use, or if they have trucks, if they use supplementary feeding, which means that for that supplementary feeding there is some field allocated for the cultivation of that supplementary field, tea, etc. And also how much the way they consume, if it is bought from outside, or if they self-produce their food, or how they market or distribute their production, and do they use cars, or for how long the distance they market, they distribute their products, etc. So in short, it's about calculating the inputs and the outputs to understanding the total impact on the biological resources of the earth being used for this production system. And in our case, when we compared the industrial livestock production and the nomadic pastoralist livestock production system for goat meat, the result was 135% less. And also the methodology is also integrated with this knowledge set of the influence of any production system on the positive influences of any production systems on nature, on the biological capacity of the world as well. As I said before, there are many positive impacts provided by the nomadic pastoralism, such as ecological connectivity, seed dispersal, maintenance of grasslands, etc. And they are also included within the calculation. There is this article that describes the methodology very clearly, but well, I will ask my colleague Ayça if it would be possible to share the link of the study on the chat box.
Thank you, Engin. And we also have some additional questions here in chat from Ms. Maja Gregorić-Srzentic. Thank you for inspiring lecture. The question is, how can we improve education and capacity building among local pastoralists while reducing the administrative burden to them? And it's complex regulation, forms, reporting, and things. And those people are usually not so flexible about the access to the internet forms, ministries, other regulation forms. And what forms of support do you think in training and institutional reform are needed to make transhumance more accessible and sustainable?
Let me start with saying that, as I said before, one of the main, motivations for pastoralists to keep, maintaining this livelihood is independence, actually. So the bureaucracy is one of the most important, annoying challenges that they are facing, and all the procedures they need to go through for many different reasons, including the compensations, etc. So this is a challenge for them, and this is a very hardship. This is a very hard, difficult livelihood, and allocation of time is very difficult for them as well. For instance, we also try to, as I said before, the building networks even between the communities is very important for increasing the visibility and recognition of these communities. But even for that reason, the pastoralists very difficultly find time to allocate. So that's what I try to say. The policies and also the implementation and the enforcement needs to be adapted to the mobility, to the needs of the pastoralism. And so the question was there, not if pastoralism can adapt itself to modernity, but if modernity can adapt itself to the realities, to socio-ecological realities of the pastoralism itself. Let me give you an example. For instance, it has never been applied, but it was in Turkey back in 1960s. There was this regulation which was called migratory schools, and the reason for developing this regulation was to respond to the needs of the nomadic pastoralists in Turkey and to have these schools moving with the communities during the migration periods. There are such cases in other countries as well, but it never worked because there was no political will in terms of enforcing this regulation. But also in terms of trainings, etc. There is one other thing that maybe I forgot to say, that the unequal relations between the pastoralists and the decision makers. So many of the pastoralists do feel that they are condescended, they are patronized by others, by the third parties, as if they are the ones that need to be taught. that need to receive information, but it's actually a mutual relation. Both sides can, teach each other many things and co-product knowledge together. And so such training systems should, have such a principle, responding to this reality on the ground, and from the design stage, it should be communicated with the pastoralists themselves to identify how to, move on in terms of, these trainings or knowledge co-production systems. So it's a very simple principle to try to be very inclusive and design and implement and monitor and evaluate any intervention together with the pastoralists. Only after that it can work. Let me also give you an example regarding how it doesn't work in Turkey. For instance, there was this course to be shepherd, to be recognized as a shepherd by the legal system. There was this course called Shepherd School, but actually the people who were giving trainings at these schools were less knowledgeable than the shepherds themselves, who were supposed to attend the training. So it was many of the pastors that we knew got furious, but they had to do that. So it's another bureaucratic challenge that they were facing. But yeah, in short, I would recommend a principle that all such interventions should be consulted with the pastoralists first and design, implement, and monitor and evaluate later on also together with them.
Thanks, Engin. We have 3 more questions, I would say, and 5 more minutes. So
Okay.
let's try to be as short and precise as we can, and then we'll have to say thank you very much once again and conclude with this webinar. First question is, how exactly are transhumance roots in Spain protected, and what does that protection entail?
It's actually coming from the 15th century, 1450, something like that. There was this, in the past, transhumance and livestock production systems are much more important than today. And there was this Council of Mesta, it was called, I believe. And even during the Roman empires, maybe you know the trattori, the migration routes, transhumance routes in central Italy, they were also protected because they were also very important for the states to collect taxes. And these roads were also serving as the geographical locations for the states to collect tax and to regulate the mobility of the livestock. But historically, yes, the rover roads were protected always during the Spain empire, etc. But and then this protection was reconfirmed by the royal decree that I mentioned earlier in 1995. So in its essence, the decree says that there can be the migration routes cannot be allocated for any other land use, including private or public reasons, which means that you cannot, convert those migration routes for agriculture, or you cannot convert those migration routes for other uses, even if they are passing through a nature protected area. The rights of the community should be recognized for passage. In the current days, the routes are, apart from the migration period, the routes are actually being utilized for ecotourism reasons, for diversification of income. But during the migration period, it is used for by the transhumans. And yes, it is. I say it's protected, but I also said that many of them are degraded, and some of them are lost, grabbed by other land users. But the decree still says that these routes shall be protected against any threats, and the rights of the transhumans should be recognized using those routes. The big ones, so there are 4 main categories. The big one is the cañadas reales. The width is 111 meters. So it is the main route that many the main routes that many transhumans are using. It's very wide, and there are cañadas also passing through Madrid. I am sure you have seen that every September, October, there is a huge march in Madrid. The sheep are passing through Madrid because one of the cañadas is passing through Madrid. So it is their legal right to use that route during the migration, and the legislation is protecting their rights accordingly. But they also use it as a way of celebrating the legacy, cultural legacy of transhumans in Spain. It's a big event in Spain.
Okay, and I would say now for this last question from Mr. Grga Frangash is about that Croatian agricultural policies, regulations, and administrative frameworks completely ignore transhumans, not because of hostile intent, but because the lack of care. Their focus is on intensive industrial livestock raising practices. And can you suggest any relevant examples of changing similar attitudes from other countries?
Yeah, it's especially in the last century that there was in many countries there was just a simple neglection. It's not, being in some countries it's not being against transhumans, but they just neglected it. So, and the result was the same, the abundance of the practice. And of course there are different responses to change the situation, but there are many commonalities. Like as it is the case with IYRP, first of all, we need to showcase the benefits this practice is providing to the welfare of the all. It's not just a folkloric romantic way of life. It is a very rational way of production system, which can be supported by the modern legislation and modern tools, innovative tools, and can be used as a complementary way to respond to the needs of the communities themselves, but also for the welfare of the nature and climate and all in general. And the other approach in many places is right-based approach, because actually the lands they use in many countries, the land they use are not owned by this community. So the private way of land tenure was not there for centuries, and they had customary rights for usufruct rights to use those lands, some of which are under commons category in different countries. But for instance, in France, when we say commons, it is actually, we are referring to a common land governed by the community living there. But in other countries, I believe that's also the case for Balkan countries, is that when you say commons, it is state-owned places, and the full regulation is done by the state. And in many cases, the states are not recognizing the rights of the communities in using, not owning, but using these lands. And so it is also an issue of rights. So it's also advocating for the basic rights regarding land tenure, regarding access to natural and other resources of the communities. So there is a global movement built around this as well, to advocate for the rights of the communities as a way to respond to the challenges these communities are facing.
Okay, thank you very much, Engin, once again, and to all the entities who were here with us. More than 60 people in total was listening to the webinar. I think we can be happy that there is still some, at least, transhumans here in Croatia and in neighboring countries, and we hope that we'll keep them for the future. As a conclusion, I just want to say that as a part of this Mosaic of Life project, this is just first in the series of webinars that we'll be having by the end of the project in 2030. So I hope some of you at least will join us in the future webinars, also tackling topics of grasslands, nature protection, and other things that are connected to it. Thank you very much once again, and the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel in a few days. Goodbye and thank you.